We are divine ambassadors. Part of our mission in the world is to protect truth, to fight for justice, to stand up to evil, and to protect innocent people. So the Jewish people, as all good people, need to do whatever it is in their power to stand up to anti-Semites, to protect the Jewish people from anti-Semitism, from anti-Semites and anti-Semitism. However, and this is the important thing, we must never internalize the anti-Semitism and make it the main motif of our story. The main motif of our story is that we are agents of the creator of the world to transform the world.
Welcome to Ordinary People with Extraordinary Stories. I'm Chana Weisberg, host of this podcast. Joining me today, we have Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson, who is returning again. If you watched his previous episode, he was talking a lot about his personal story and his personal life. And we thought we'd have him back at this point in time to speak about the topic of anti-Semitism. When we look outside, we see that anti-Semitism nowadays is just so rampant, and everyone is trying to grapple with it and trying to find the answers to it and to what we can be doing and how do we look at this, what perspective we can have on this situation. So, Rabbi Jacobson, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time and your wisdom.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation and for the privilege and opportunity.
Thank you.
I
So
got
let's
tremendous
start.
feedback on our previous conversation.
Previous one, it was amazing. We got
many.
tremendous feedback. So many people were so touched and so enlightened through your wisdom. So that's why we keep having you back as long as you'll agree.
Thank you. That means a lot. I appreciate it.
It's not always so good to be so good, because then you just get asked back, right? In any case, so the topic of anti-Semitism, let's first, how would you define what is anti-Semitism and how does it differ, let's say, from other forms of hate?
It's a very powerful question. And I think anti-Semitism, is, we have a great, maybe it's sad to say, but we have a great advantage. What do they say? Hindsight is 20/20. Jews have been around for 3,700 years approximately, since the first Jew, Abraham. And anti-Semitism has been there from day one, or almost from day one. So we have so much experience with anti-Semitism. And when you have so much experience with anti-Semitism, there's a lot of wisdom there, a lot of pain, but also a lot of wisdom. So anyone who ever thinks about, discusses anti-Semitism, it's always so important to be able to have perspective. We literally have 20/20 vision of hindsight of almost 4,000 years of a people that almost hasn't had a day of peace and serenity and tranquility. So there's so much to learn from that, and any healthy approach would really need to take in all of our history into context. So, one of the most important things about anti-Semitism is that it's never about what Jews do and don't do. It's been around literally for thousands of years in countries that even never saw Jews. They never even saw Jews, right? People who never even had interactions with Jews. And yet the anti-Semitism is so deep and so profound. Another fascinating thing is that it spans cultures, religions, philosophies, secular cultures, religious cultures from all types and shapes. And it tells you something so profound. And really, there's only two ways to look at it. Either Jews are such a heinous, evil, disgusting, abominable nation, vermin of the earth, bacteria of society, the cancerous tumors that will destroy all of human civilization, and therefore the hatred is so justified, and it should be pervasive, and it should continue for eternity as long as there's even one Jew alive. That's one perspective. And then there's, of course, the antithetical perspective, and that is, wow, what is this about the Jewish people? What is this energy that they bring into the world that has triggered and continues to trigger millions, billions, and billions of people for thousands of years across cultures and countries and civilizations and empires from all types and walks of life? It's like, wow, I really want to learn about this. And sadly to say, Jews who are not anchored in a healthy and powerful Jewish perspective, naturally, and I say this without judgment, can easily gravitate to the other perspective. It's like, what are we doing so wrong
Mm.
that it's triggering this? And I get it, because if, as I as I once said in a lecture, if my child is being expelled from every single classroom, every single school, by every single principal and teacher, even schools that are known to be good schools, nice schools, good principals, suddenly they say, you know what, maybe your kid has the problem. So Jews look at themselves and they say, we have been expelled literally from almost any country we lived in. You could count on one hand the number of countries that have not expelled Jews, and that includes New Zealand, Australia, and maybe
Mm.
another two or three, including the United States of America, although we came close. So that's a tremendous blessing, in America. But when you look at it, it's like that, why did everybody expel us? What
Mm.
is it? My nose? Is it
Mm.
our wealth? Is it our poverty? Is it our religion? There must be something so despicable. And that's a perspective that I get. And
Right.
sadly, unconsciously, many Jews internalize this.
Mm.
And the only remedy is to really understand anti-Semitism from a true, deep Jewish perspective, which is a very spiritual perspective. And you have to come to terms with very profound truths about the Jewish people that are uncomfortable for many Jews.
So what would that spiritual perspective be? I mean, we know it says that it's a known halacha, it's a known fact that Esav hates Jacob.
The spirit,
So
yeah,
what does that mean? Like, why is that, and what is the spiritual dimension of it?
yes. So I think one aspect of it is, I've said, I've given a lecture the other day. It was a few months ago at the JLI retreat, and I said, my
Mm.
student people always ask me at lectures or seminars or classes or emails, can you really prove that Torah is from heaven? Can you really prove that
Mm.
Judaism is divine? After everything's said and done, can a rational, scientifically prone mind in 2025 really embrace in an internalized and authentic and mature way this idea that Torah is divine? What we call Torah is min hashemayim. And
Mm.
it's a very legitimate and good question, of course, because there are so many myths out there. And I've said to students, I said that maybe one of the most powerful proofs in thousands of years that literally Torah is divine is when you look at the world during this past year and a half, because
Mm.
something unimaginable and unfathomable happened, literally. And that is Israel was attacked out of the blue, October 7th, 2023, Simchas Torah 5784. In the most heinous and barbaric way, atrocities that reminded us literally of the Holocaust, and
Mm.
barbarity that reminded us of the Middle Ages. Literally,
Absolutely.
1648, 1649. And we're not going to get graphic here, but everybody knows the stories, sadly, and they continue as we speak. The Bibas babies brought back in coffins, etc.
Mm.
And what you would expect on a minimal level would be some empathy, some understanding. And in the most elite academic institutions of the United States of America, not North Korea, not Syria and Egypt and Afghanistan, but United States of America elite institutions, academic institutions dedicated to progressive thought, to liberal thinking, to open-mindedness, to tolerance, to sensitivity for human rights. Hamas was lauded and praised. The
Mm.
Jewish people in Israel deemed as the villain. And this happened all over America, all over the world. And Jews began scratching their heads like,
Mhm.
who's living in a nightmare? Who's living in the matrix? Is this a real world? Is this a fake world? Is this the United States of America? Is this Harvard University, Oxford University, Columbia University, Yale University, Duke University? I mean, Jewish parents have been paying $300,000-$400,000 to get
Mm.
their kids through these
Right.
universities, and
Mhm.
this for them was the quintessential American nachas, the golden Medina. We made it. My kid made it through Harvard, $400,000 less. I told him, you can
Mm.
give the money to Chabad and send your kids to yeshiva, and they'll know the difference between Hitler and Churchill. They'll know the difference between good and evil. That's it. It's not so complicated.
Mhm.
But what does this show us? What does this tell us? And never mind in newspapers and websites, the levels of anti-Semitism from people who were considered civilized,
Mhm.
creme de la creme. And I said this for me, this is
Mhm.
the greatest proof that Torah is literally divine. When you read
Interesting.
the Torah says God has chosen the Jewish people to revolutionize the landscape of planet Earth, to
What
transform the world, to be his agents, to create divine, bring in divine consciousness into the world, or in Judaic terms, to turn the world into a place of holiness, morality, goodness, and godliness. Now, we live in such different times. We have come to doubt this. We're just
Mhm.
people. We suffered a lot. Finally, we made it in America. We did amazingly well here with God's grace. I mean, America has been so good to the Jewish people. My parents and so many other parents are refugees who ran away from Stalinist Russia or from Hitler's Holocaust, or every person. Unbelievable opportunity for religious Jews, for secular Jews, for Jews who wanted to assimilate, for Jews who didn't want to assimilate, for Jews who wanted to make money, for Jews who wanted to go into academia, into Hollywood, into Wall Street, into politics. Into
Mhm.
politics, incredible, incredible stuff. What happened there, and the government even assisting people, and the freedom of religion. I mean, such incredible opportunity, and Jews felt finally we
Right.
made it. This is if this is exile, what does redemption look like?
Hmm.
Like, what else do you want? And we even have a state of Israel. It's like we have a maid. You want to go to Israel for 3 weeks and eat shawarma and Strauss ice cream? You
Right.
can do that. You can even visit the Western Wall, and then you come back to your beautiful apartment in Lakewood, Muncie, Beverly Hills, Chicago, Toronto. Not Toronto. Toronto's not the United
Too
States.
cold.
Where you come
Yeah.
from. That's where you come
Right.
from. But
Right.
anyway, right, really, really, really amazing.
No, it's interesting that you say this because when I was recently interviewing Nissim Black, he was saying that the reason why he decided to convert to Judaism, one of the things that struck him was the anti-Semitism, the suffering of the Jews, and when he was learning about the Holocaust. And it was just fascinating to me to hear that someone who heard about the suffering of Jews decided because of that, this proves the
Unbelievable.
authenticity of the Torah,
It just
you know,
shows you what
and
a soul, what a soul their
yeah,
person has.
unbelievable. Do there
I
seems to
just
be
want to say
though.
something cute. He
Yeah.
once interviewed me in the beginning of Corona. We did a Zoom together, and he said, when I was learning for conversion, I wanted to learn Judaism. And Shabbos is the best day to learn Torah. So he said, I put
Right.
on your classes every Shabbos, and I learned with you Gemara and Chumash and Chassidus and this, and it was amazing Shabbos. So I said, I think you're the first person I could say I'm so proud that you were listening to me on Shabbos. This is
That's
paid
right.
conversion. But it's
That's
such a
cute.
true sentiment. It's like, where is this coming from?
Right.
Unless somebody cannot accept that the Jewish people represent an energy in the world that is literally otherworldly, none of this makes sense. And we're going to do one of two things: either just blame ourselves endlessly
Mm,
and incessantly and become schmatas and spineless victims of always finding where we are at fault, which is one of the greatest Jewish traumas that we have from 2,000 years of exile.
mm,
Self shame, self loathing, inferiority complexes, etc., etc. Or it's just such a sense of despair and gloom and depression when really,
mm,
Jews were never embarrassed by this because it just showed them what a good job we're doing. It showed
mm.
them that this is true. You're dealing with a very holy people. And
Right.
our greatest responsibility is for us to recognize our holiness and not to
Mm.
live in fear, but to live charged as never before with completing our mission.
Right. So, do you think that there's been, like, an explosion after October 7th? It seems like there's been such an explosion of anti-Semitism, but there's also been an explosion of the opposite, of people who are, love the Jews, who came out as well. And do you think that there's any connection of that to the time period of Mashiach when things are gonna become much clearer who the good and who the evil is? How would you explain that?
I think absolutely. I think, we're dealing now with a world that every few years is changing in such rapid pace and such transformations happening in such a short of time. Literally, in the last 100 years, the world has changed in a way that it hasn't changed for 5,000 years.
Mm.
In the last 50 years, it has changed dramatically, and in the last 5 and 10 years, it's like if you missed the news for the week,
Right.
I sometimes shut the news for a few days because I need to be a little normal and think. And you
Right.
come back a few days later, it's like, you know, it's like what happened in the last few days. It's so dramatic and it's so intense. That's on a global level. Emotionally too, we're seeing
Mhm.
such rapid change and upheavals within people's personal lives. We spoke a little bit about this in our previous conversation and interview. So I think a lot of truth is coming to the fore.
Mm.
Whenever society is experiencing such upheavals and transformations, there's naturally an element of anxiety and fear. But really, what's happening is truth is coming to the fore. It's being spit in our face. The prophet Daniel speaks about the fact that during messianic times, there'll be clarity. He
Mhm.
says the words Yisbararu v'yislabnu v'yitzarfu rabim. Things will become clear: good, evil, black, white, hatred, love,
Mm.
bigotry, acceptance. And I think we are seeing that in a very, very powerful ways. And it's painful, but it's also a tremendous blessing. And by the way, people are seeing this in their personal and familial lives. We have been good at repressing stuff for thousands of years, and it did us well. And today it's not working. Like today, the infections, the toxicity, it's all coming to the fore. But that means also the faith is coming to the fore, the fortitude, the
Mm.
resilience, all the evil, but also all the goodness. And I
Mhm.
think we see both. And whenever you're in such a space, it's like almost God and history beaconing at you. Like,
Mm.
show up. Show up. This is not a time to cower. It's a time to lead. This is a time to empower. This is a time to inspire. And the fact that there's so much ugliness that's emerging is only an opportunity to be able to give people clarity so that we could really choose. You can finally choose. Choose which side of history you're going to be on. Choose what type of person you're going to be. Choose in which frequency you're going to live, in this frequency of fear, shame, hate, guilt, negativity, toxicity, or in the frequency of oneness and authenticity and love and redemptive consciousness. What a
Mhm.
gift! The gift of choice. The gift of choice is only when you see two choices and you see the contrast. And then you could like, oh wow, we could finally choose. What is much worse is when there's confusion and there's blurriness and there's fog. You know, there's just this
Mhm.
fog in the mind, fog in the soul, and things are very, very confusing. It's that tree of knowledge that's mixed between good and evil, and then you don't know what's life and what's death, and who's right and who's wrong, and what's real and what's not real. And when things come to the fore in this way, it's a tremendous opportunity.
So should we be fighting? Like, if this is just a spiritual reality that is, you know, just supposed to be, and it's gonna be, it was from the beginning of the time, and it's gonna be till the end of the time. So should we be fighting anti-Semitism? Should we be calling out anti-Semitism? Should we be putting our strength into that? Or should we just be shining the beacon of light, as you're saying? Like, what should be our attitude
It's
towards anti-Semites and anti-Semitism?
such an important and powerful question. We are divine ambassadors. Part of our mission in the world is to protect truth, to fight for justice, to stand up to evil, and to protect innocent people. So the Jewish people, as all good people, need to do whatever it is in their power to stand up to anti-Semites, to protect the Jewish people from anti-Semitism, from anti-Semites and anti-Semitism, to call out evil, to educate society in every conceivable and possible way with absolute clarity, conviction, moral fortitude, resilience, and faith. However, and this is the important thing, we must never internalize the anti Semitism and make it the main motif of our story. The main
Mhm.
motif of our story is that we are agents of the creator of the world to transform the world, to create a divine revolution where divine awareness and consciousness floods the earth like the water covers the sea, in the phrase of the prophet Isaiah about the messianic times. Our mission is to be able to hold up the frequency of love and oneness. And I want to articulate something that I think in Kabbalistic and Hasidic literature is articulated in the most stunning of ways. stunning of ways. And it's even saying it is soothing for my soul, even though it's such a painful subject. And that is, what is the real, what is the core of anti-Semitism? We can get into all of the historical data and facts, and that's important, but I want to get to the core of it. The core of it
Mhm.
is as follows. The Jewish people were chosen by the creator of the world to hold up a certain frequency. What's this frequency? We can live on different frequencies, literally. I can live on the frequency of hate, guilt, shame, negativity, jealousy, animosity, insecurity, comparing myself to others, looking for validation, whatever it is. The Jewish people were chosen to hold up the frequency of truth. What's the frequency of truth? Ein Oid Milvadai. The frequency of truth is the oneness of Hashem, the oneness of God that pervades every leaf, every reptile, every fish, every bird, every mammal, every human being, every star, every atom, every neuron, every cell, from the black hole to a tiny frog or squirrel in my backyard here in Muncie, New York. The oneness
Mm.
of Hashem that pervades everything. And that life is about a choice between tuning into the frequency of oneness and truth and trust and faith and love, or tuning out of that frequency into the frequency of ego, which is easing God out or easing greatness out,
Mm.
to the all of the different distractions in life, whatever they may be, which take me away from the frequency of oneness. The Jewish people were chosen to hold up this frequency. All of anti-Semitism is the attempt of what the Kabbalah calls the klipa, the shells of reality that are not ready to face the truth that everything is part of oneness, fighting this frequency. By killing the
Mm.
Jews, by persecuting the Jews, they hope, consciously or unconsciously, that they will finally be able to extricate themselves and the world from this truth that the Jewish people are holding up to their face, and it's very, very hard to accept. And they push against us, and sometimes they're very successful. A Holocaust was quite successful. It wiped out a third of the Jewish people, right? Most
Mm.
of Eastern European Jewry was wiped out. Haman came close to success. Haman,
Mhm.
you know,
Mm.
I'm laughing, but his agenda was exactly Hitler's agenda and Hamas's agenda and Iran's
Right.
agenda to wipe out every single living Jew. What is this? What is it? What it's our nose? What we like sushi? We like Chinese
Mm.
food? We like golf? It's very, very deep. It's so deep. I'm remembering now of Fabring, and I heard it recorded Purim 1965. The Rebbe dedicated a talk on anti-Semitism, and this was his point. The Jewish people are holding up the frequency of oneness, and this is pushback. Let's destroy it. And you know what happens? They push down the Jewish people, but we come right back. And the reason we come
Mm.
right back is you can't destroy God. You can destroy the frequency of truth. What is Mashiach? Mashiach is when all the clippers, when all the shells in the world say, okay, we got it. It's time to surrender. It's
Mm.
time to surrender to truth. That is redemptive consciousness. We must fight anti Semitism, but our main goal is hold up the frequency of truth, hold up the frequency of love. Don't duck, don't surrender. This is not about ego. This is not about arrogance. This is about the divine mission to heal the world. When Jews start internalizing the hatred with self doubt and ambivalence, it creates emotionally sick Jews.
Mm.
The leadership of Israel for generations. I grew up at the feet of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, as many of you know, and I was privileged the last years to be one of his oral scribes. One of the most painful things that I experienced throughout my entire childhood was the Rebbe, almost at every single public address, crying his heart out that the leadership of the Jewish people in Israel don't understand what it means to be a Jew, what it means to be a proud Jew, and how to deal with poisonous hatred instead of concessions and more
Mm.
concession and more concessions that literally invites the devil into your home, which is exactly what happened at October 7th. Or as Winston
Mhm.
Churchill said, appeasement is feeding the alligator in the hope that you will be eaten last.
Right.
Instead, hold up the frequency of love of life. Be obsessed with love of life and stop apologizing. And the
Mm.
world will respect you because those who hate you will hate you regardless. And those who are looking for truth will admire you so deeply. They're craving for this, they're yearning for this. I mean, if you just look at the developments recently, you have, and this is really, really completely beyond politics, but you have a non Jew
Mm.
considered the leader of the free world, okay, having the chutzpah for the first time in history to say that America, who does not own the Middle East, is going to
Mm.
occupy Gaza, take all of its residents and send them to some paradise country where they can live in peace, turn Gaza into the Riviera of the Middle East. Reporters were screaming, it's their home, it's their home. And the president says, their home? It's a hellhole.
Mm.
It's a hellhole. What a home. What a home. You want people to die and die and die. More war, more war, more. I'm giving them an alternative. And I'm thinking to myself, and Jews who
Mm.
were promised and given by God Israel 4,000 years ago, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, Joshua, David, Solomon, etc., were embarrassed to say this for 60 years. We're
That's
embarrassed
right.
to even speak like we were so afraid of the word occupation, as though Jews are occupying the whole world from Japan to Alaska, from Peru to Moscow. We have one little tiny country the size of New Jersey and Dallas International Airport that the creator of the world has given us with 52 Muslim countries around. And we're afraid to say the words, this is mine. And not
Mm.
because I'm a conqueror, because it's one little piece of land that the creator of the world gave to the Jewish people for eternity. This is what happens when Jews, instead of understanding who they are from within, are looking without for validation. Could you tell me I'm a good guy? Could you tell me I'm handsome?
Mm.
Could you tell me, please, that I'm a smart fellow? You know,
Right.
we talk about psychologically the desperation for the need of validation, not knowing who you are from inside.
Mm.
Collectively, this is one of our greatest crises for thousands of years.
Right. But when you say that, the reason for anti-Semitism is because we're holding up this symphony of the world. We're holding up this truth. So why would it be against Jews who are not religious or who are not connected to holding up
Oh,
this?
that's a good that's such a good question. You know
Mm.
who asks this question always? These Jews. These Jews. We
Right.
did everything. I
Right.
intermarried.
I'm sure.
I
Right.
intermarried. I remember my mother told me about a woman who was commenting to her that one of her children became religious, and she says to my mother, "I don't understand what happened. I raised her on glatt
Mm.
treif.
Right.
I fed her only treif. Where did she get these crazy thoughts of religion?" Right? These are what these Jews are saying. We have contributed more money to Harvard University and Columbia University than any other demographic in the world. We have built
Mhm.
more museums. We have sponsored more programs for tolerance between Arabs and Jews than anybody else in the world. When I went to visit those who were evacuated from the South after the massacres of October 7th, one of the women was telling me, she looks at me, she says, Rabbi Jacobson, you don't understand. I was the one who was
Right.
transporting
Right.
cancer patients from Gaza to Israeli hospitals day after day after day because I love people, because I want coexistence. And these are
Right.
the people who came into my house and murdered my family. She couldn't
Right.
even understand it. She couldn't wrap her brain
Unbelievable.
around it. Like we're the atheists. We're the
Right.
secularists. We're not the
But that's the
Mashiach. We're
question.
not
Like, if it's
fundamentalists, right? Excellent.
but if it is a spiritual concept that they're fighting against that, then why are they fighting against
Exactly.
everyone?
Very powerful. And the answer to this is as powerful as the question. Sometimes answers are not as good as questions. In this case, I think the answer is
It's
as
even
potent,
more.
potent to the question. And I'm going to quote here the Rebbe who once said on Purim that the Megillah, the book of Esther, talks about Haman, who hated Mordechai because he wouldn't bow down to him. Or to put it in our vocabulary, Mordechai would hold up the divine symphony and the frequency of oneness, and he would not let it go even when Haman passed it. Now, Haman wasn't
Mhm.
stupid. Haman was a deep
Mhm.
guy. He looked at Mordechai. The Rebbe said, everybody was bowing down to him. Now, I want to ask you a question, Han. If I don't know, 6 billion people were bowing down to you every time you walk down the street, and one old Jew did not bow down to you, big deal.
Mhm.
Big deal. Why
Right.
did Haman care so much? Everybody's bowing down to you. The whole world is crazy about you. The answer is Haman knew that Mordechai is the only one who got it right. Everybody
Mhm.
else is just selling their soul. Everybody else, they don't believe, they don't even know who they are. Mordechai actually, Haman looked into Mordechai's eyes. He knew that Mordechai got it right. This drove him crazy. It created such a powerful void in Haman's life. So what does he do? He says, I want to kill this man. But then he says, no, I'm not killing him. I'm going to kill every last Jew, man, woman, and child. Ki higidu lo yes'am Mordechai, because they told him about the nation of Mordechai. What did they tell him? What did the Rebbe said? What did they tell him? And the Rebbe said beautiful words. This is actually Purim 1966, which means almost 60 years ago and a year before the Six-Day War. The Rebbe said, Haman started to ask a question. This Mordechai's stubbornness not to bow down to me? Is it coming from his own intelligence and spiritual acumen and the inner emotional work that he did on himself? And they told him, no,
Mm.
it's something that belongs to the entire nation. Every Jewish
Mm.
child has it. Es am Mordechai. The Rebbe said in Yiddish, Haman realized as jede Yiddish kind is a kleine Mordechai. Every
Mm.
Jewish baby is a little Mordechai. And even that Jew who screams, I'm an atheist, I'm
Mm.
secular, I'm not connected, I don't learn Torah, I don't observe mitzvahs, I don't even believe in it. I think the whole Bible is fiction. Maybe I like gefilte fish. I had good grandparents who were religious, but I'm really disassociated from this. I'm just a liberal, progressive, left-wing Democrat who believes in science and physics, and I'm a Darwinian. I really don't buy into any of this. They would be sent to the gas chambers, just as
Mm.
the Jew with the Streimel and the great rabbi and mystic and scholar. Why? So the Tanya, the author of the Tanya, is the founder of Chabad, and it's probably one of the most fundamental ideas in Hasidic philosophy and spirituality. He says in chapter 18, this only tells you who's holding up the frequency. Every Jew. Every
Mm.
Jew. How? Their very presence. They may not see it in themselves, but the whole world sees it in them. And I'm
Mm.
going to tell you here,
Beautiful.
and
Beautiful.
this is the truth. And
Mhm.
because it's so true, this is how the Alter Rebbe in Tanya makes a point, and he says, so stop living a lie where you're betraying yourself every day. Start seeing yourself the way everybody
Mm.
else sees you, because they're actually seeing the truth. And you know deep down, when it comes to a moment of true vulnerability and authenticity, you know that you won't give that up.
Mm.
So that's the sad thing when I am split within myself, and I don't know who I really am. And then what I need to say is, oh, they hate me just because I have money or because I don't have money. It used to be because we live in the shtetl and we smell, and then it was because we assimilate with everybody, because we're
Mm.
successful, because we're unsuccessful. It's because we have our own religion, because we are religious, because we're not really religious. There's always different excuses. We want to, because we're capitalists, because we're communists, because we're socialists, because in every generation there's another excuse, but it's all coming back to the same point. There's a holiness that the Jewish people embody, and the world is sensitive to it, and the evil is even more sensitive to it,
Mm.
because evil is allergic to goodness. And I always tell campus students, I said, you want to know how holy the Jewish people are? Just look at who hates them.
Mm.
Tell me who hates you, and I'll tell you who you are. When you're hated by Pharaoh, by Haman, by Nebuchadnezzar, by Titus, by Vespasian, by Khmelnytsky, by Joseph Stalin, Adolf Hitler, Eichmann, Himmler, Goebbels, Rosenberg, Yasser Arafat,
Mm.
Nasrallah, and Osama bin Laden, right? Rouhani and Ahmadinejad and Sinwar.
Wow. Did you memorize all this? It's
This is my history.
incredible.
This is my
Wow.
history.
Incredible. Yes.
When you're hated by all these people, I want to know, what are you doing right? I
Mm.
want to be your friend. That's why Nissim Block converted. I want to be your friend.
Right.
What
Right.
is your secret? Wow. If Hitler sees in you the embodiment of evil, endangering his very existence, wow, you're doing something right.
Mm.
Stalin sees you as the greatest enemy of mankind. Everyone who believes in murder and rape and sadism and barbarity sees you as culprit number one whom we have to get rid of. You are the embodiment of Satan. Wow, I want to be your friend. I want to know your secret. How much goodness do you represent that all of these people who murdered millions of their own people, not just they murdered millions of their own people, right? Stalin
Right.
murdered more Soviets than Stalin murdered more people than Hitler, and most of them his own people, the Soviets.
Mm.
And they hate you more than anybody else. Wow. It says in Psalms, I become wise for my enemies.
Right.
And this is it's another incredible thing you see is people think that the Jewish people today are not the same Jews who stood at Sinai, who left Egypt, who
Mm.
experienced Purim, who experienced Hanukkah, who coronated King Solomon, who built the first temple. It's not the same Jews. Come on. We're just living in the 20s. It's not the same. We have some memories. Maybe we still keep the seventh day, but look at anti-Semitism and you'll see it's exactly the same Jews who left Egypt and stood at Sinai, and the same Hashmonaim who fought the Syrian Greeks in Hanukkah, and the same Rabbi Akiva who fought the Romans, the same exact Jews. Just look at the hatred and you'll see it hasn't faded. The same intense venom towards our ancestors 100, 500, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years ago still lives today. What does that mean? It means that our spiritual energy is as strong as ever. Look in the mirror and you'll see it.
Right.
Look what they're seeing in you. Don't call yourself a simple, insignificant, valueless Jew who's just around after thousands of years. You're literally carrying that frequency of divine infinity that they carried when they left Egypt and they stood at Mount Sinai. It's your genes, it's your energy. Look at it. Wow. Celebrate it.
So does that mean that we can't do anything about it though? Like, on the one hand, it's a wow because it's been happening for thousands of years and they realize who we are. But on the other hand, it almost feels like, well, it's just going to continue no matter what.
I
So
think
that's a very sad like outlook as well.
but I think it's to the contrary. I think there's a tremendous amount we can do on two fronts. First of all, there's the natural front and there's the supernatural front. On the natural front, I think Jewish people are living today in a position where they have, thank God, been given a gift that they can defend themselves
Mhm.
through Israel and also through allies, many good people, many still very good people, whether it's in the United States of America or around the world. And this is where we need to be able to stand up with absolute pride and conviction. In the words of the Talmud, "Habal lahargeh chashkem lahargeh," somebody who comes to
Mhm.
kill you, kill him first. This must be done on every level, politically, militarily, and also spiritually and socially and educationally. In other words, when the Jewish people will finally be able to embrace who they are and understand that their rights, for example, to the land of Israel, don't come from the United Nations or from the
Mhm.
Balfour Declaration or from any individual who agrees that they're entitled to have a land that belongs to the Jewish people, but it's a sacred gift of Hashem, of God, to the Jewish people, that Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, David, Solomon, Samuel, and Saul, and Jeremiah, and Amos, and Isaiah walked on this soil. And it's not just a history, it's a truth of history, it's that too. But it's also a divine truth woven into the fabric of reality is that Israel belongs to the Jewish people. Stop conceding, stop
Mhm.
compromising. The Arabs never got the memo that we won. They never got it. You know
Mhm.
why? Because we pushed them away with one hand and we brought back the terror with another hand. We're like,
Mhm.
yeah, we won, but we're a democracy and you also have a point. And the
Mhm.
terrorists all around Israel realized, oh, we could win this war. They don't have the confidence, they don't have the unwavering strength. For every victory, we made another concession. For every triumph, we said, but you know what? We're not really sure about this. And this has been the worst disaster in the last 100 years that a modern, powerful country should make
Mhm.
such grave errors of doubting itself and not understanding its neighbors. It made it worse, not only for the Jews, it made it worse for the Arabs. So, this is on a very practical level. Jews need a different way of thinking. Stop appeasing, stop being afraid of people's opinions. Realize who you are, what your responsibility is. Never, ever, ever make compromises with people who want to murder every single child of yours. Stop that game. The war against Hamas in Gaza, it started too late. October 8th? No, the moment the Fogel family was slaughtered in Itamar,
Mhm.
Friday night, an entire family was slaughtered. That was October 7th. The gates of hell should have opened up on terrorists. But Jews appease and appease and appease and deluded themselves that they're developing this new Middle East. Shimon Peres said we have Mizrach Tichon Chadash, a
Mhm.
new Middle East, and it's the fanatic radicals like the Lubavitcher Rebbe who are destroying the peace and who are pessimists and don't believe in a bright future. And when one Jew is murdered, a family is murdered, a bus explodes. It's nothing. This was
Right.
Jews severed from their soul, from their conscience, from their Torah. The Torah says you need to protect a country and you need to protect every citizen with unwavering strength. So that's something that needs to be done, should be done on every level, on all fronts, with every resource that we have unapologetically. And in fact, all good people in the world will say thank you, even if officially they won't be able to approve of everything. But especially
Mhm.
today, they'll say thank you, they will love it. On a spiritual level, though, it's only an invitation to show us how much progress there was, how much progress there is thousands of years. The world is getting closer to redemption
Mhm.
because of these efforts. So not only is there not something that it's not only not an invitation to passivity, but on the contrary, it means that every single time a Jew tunes in to that frequency of oneness and love and faith and trust, which is basically channeled through Torah and mitzvahs. Through Torah and
Mhm.
mitzvahs, that's the channel of the frequency of oneness. Every time we tune into it, you're making a real difference. And
What no, go what about Jews who are afraid, because of the anti-Semitism to display their Jewishness? What would you say about that? What is there's a real danger to wear a yarmulke in some city in France, or on the subway in New York City. What would you say to that? Or put your mezuzah on your doorpost in your college campus?
right. It's this is a very sensitive question because you know can one demand from a person, if a person feels there's real danger in this neighborhood or this community, that if he has a mezuzah on the door, or he goes a yarmulke, or he has a garment that displays that he or she is a Jew, and they could be viciously physically attacked. I
Mhm.
understand. I think we have to be very
Right.
very sensitive to
Of course.
that physical reality. But I do think that on a collective level, our response must never be ducking in fear. On the
Mhm.
contrary, our response must be to redouble our Jewishness and to be able to realize that our responsibility to the world is to actually educate and enlighten and inspire the world. And like Abraham, smash the idols of stupidity, of hatred,
Mhm.
of superficiality without shame, without hesitancy, without extraordinary deliberation that paralyzes us. So I think collectively as a community, the call of the hour is the opposite.
Mhm.
Jewish
Eh
pride in the most
Mhm.
powerful way, and not pride in an arrogant way, like I don't care about anybody. Jewish pride in a real way is the most humble thing you can do. You're a messenger.
Mhm.
It's not even about you. It's not even about us. It's
Mhm.
really not. You know what the interesting thing is about anti-Semitism is? Don't take it personal. This
Mhm.
has nothing to do with you and me. I'm not
Mhm.
so good looking. I'm not so
Mhm.
brilliant.
Mhm.
I'm not the whatever it is. It's nothing to do
Right.
with us. This has to do with the creator of the world. Don't take
Mm.
it personal. We don't have to
And
take
would
credit
w
for it, and therefore we don't have to shame ourselves for it. This
Right.
literally has to do. You can open the Bible, it says it hundreds of times. The creator of the world chose us for this mission. It's a tremendous privilege. It also comes with a
Mhm.
lot of pain, but it also comes with profound bliss, because when you tune into that energy of being a channel of God, there's nothing as blissful, there's nothing as powerful. It's the
Mhm.
only real reality. All other joys are distractions and cause more anxiety. This is the only
Mhm.
place to be in. But there is pain because the world is not, because Mashiach is not here yet. That's the pain. The only pain is that the truth of this love is not evident in every nook and cranny and crevice of civilization. And that's where we must plow ahead with the greatest of conviction and clarity and joy.
Sometimes it's not so clear. For example, there might be some people who are borderline anti-Semites or somewhat anti-Semitic, but are also on the side of truth or goodness or right, the right-wing commentators who are promoting, life and positivity and morality. Should we be using these individuals for our goals, or should we be staying away from them?
It's a very great, good question. And I'm thinking of a precedent, but it's a very different type of precedent. But I think it may enlighten us in this area. It's a story that I heard, and he said it publicly, from Alan Dershowitz. And he said that he once wrote, he was, of course, a law professor in Harvard University for many decades. And Professor Dershowitz told his story publicly, and I think at a banquet of the Chabad Shluchim. And he also shared it many other times, and he may have wrote it. But I think I heard it from him at that event or maybe another event. And he said that there was a Chabad institution somewhere in the United States making a dinner and honoring Jesse Helms, I believe it was, who at that time was very anti-Israel,
Mm,
extremely. And Dershowitz wrote a letter to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, And as he put it, I had a lot of chutzpah. And I told him, Rabbi Schneerson, I don't know if this was your decision, but you should certainly tell your emissaries that this is a horrible, horrible affront to the Jewish people and to justice and to everything you represent. You're a Jew. You love
Mm.
Israel. You love Judaism. And this man is an anti-Israel advocate, and he speaks about it verbally. And he says the Rebbe wrote him back a very, very respectful letter. And he says that if I could find common ground with people, it's a foundation to be able to help them heal in other areas as well. If I
Mm.
can find common ground with people, I want to use it as an opportunity to be able to elevate them, to educate them.
Mm.
And therefore I don't agree with you. So the Rebbe didn't dismiss Dershowitz's claim. He just explained to him a different perspective. And Dershowitz says today, this same man is one of the greatest spokesmen in America pro-Israel. He
Oh,
says
wow.
he says
Interesting.
the Rebbe was really, really right. So this is a very sensitive question, and it's a good question.
Hmm.
And I don't think we should,
Hmm.
see one side as absolutely right, one side as absolutely wrong. But as a student of the Rebbe, I see so much depth and courage in that argument, because it's not about
Mm.
spinelessness, and it's not about let's fight for Israel and we're not going to give a voice to anti-Semites who are against Israel, even if when it comes to abortion or it comes to transgender, they're on
Hmm.
my side of the aisle. And I get that.
Hmm.
But the Rebbe's position was very different. Everybody
Mm.
knows that in terms of a spine of what it is to be a Jew and to believe in God and to believe in Torah, you're not going to find a comparison to the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And yet,
Hmm.
in our generation, he's considered the most tolerant Jew alive. How do these two come together? I saw the Rebbe. I grew up with the Rebbe. I knew you could not move him an inch, an eye
Mm.
of a needle, when it came to values, when it came to truth, when it came to Torah mitzvahs, when it came to fear of God. And yet, this
Mm.
person, everybody knows, was considered the embodiment of intolerant, tolerant non-hydration. The two are not a contradiction.
Mhm.
Real relationship with God in the most authentic way looks for every opportunity to find the authenticity in people and help them find it in themselves. And when you know who
Fascinating.
you are, you could connect to everybody without compromising your boundaries and your values and your identity. When you don't know who you are, you have to
Mhm.
have very strong boundaries, like get out of my ghetto. But when you know who you are, I could connect with anybody, and my intention is one intention. I want to
Mm.
find the good in them because it's there, and I want to help them find it in themselves. So I think
Right.
that approach can be a very, very powerful approach in these areas as well.
Interesting.
But
So what
without
right.
selling your
Mm.
soul. This is not about
Mhm.
selling your soul or
Mhm.
selling Israel, God forbid. It's
So
really the opposite.
you don't think it was because of Israel? Like, in other words, are you equating anti-Semitism with anti-Israel, anti-Zionism as well? What about the Jews who are against Israel but are not anti-Semitic? Is that just because they have no pride in their heritage and in who in
I think they listen. Jews have been reading the New York Times for generations, and the New York Times has been published by Jews and is
Mhm.
still published by
Mhm.
Jews. And during the Holocaust, they minimized what was happening in the Holocaust, and they wrote a public apology. And they said the reason is that the Jews then were scared of triggering the Roosevelt administration
Mhm.
and making them feel that the Jews, are looking for attention, and it can create anti-Semitism and maybe even weaken their efforts in defeating Germany. All these types of horrific, warped calculations that allowed Jews to remain silent when 6 million Jews were being gassed. And today, too, there are Jews who are so indoctrinated, are so brainwashed, so don't think for themselves, and have so lost touch with who they are, their
Mhm.
faith, their heritage, their history, and their modus operandi is appeasement, 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 so that
Mhm.
everybody thinks I am a mensch, I'm a quintessential mensch. Sometimes there's arrogance, stupidity, trauma that all come together and create the profile of Jews who become their own worst enemies. And I feel bad for them. I have
Mhm.
empathy for them. If I can do something, if they're open to any form of education and enlightenment, I will do it with humility and not with any arrogance or pride. Because I'm not going to judge anybody. Because if I had those levels of trauma, and if I was addicted to the writers in the New York Times,
Mhm.
for whom Israel and Hamas are literally equated as
Mhm.
equal,
Mhm.
or other media outlets,
Mhm.
where would I be today? Thank God I had the
Right.
privilege of standing at the feet of the Rebbe for the first 22 years of my life. and therefore developing an approach to life and teaching today an approach to life that is so liberating and so expansive. And the most important thing, it's so authentic. It's real. You're not repressing,
So
you're not denying, you're not minimizing evil, you're not looking away half of the time. It's real, it's authentic. It's like it's nauseous to be anywhere else. I feel
right.
bad. And if I could do something to help educate somebody, I will do it with happiness. But it's important to distinguish where you're part of the solution or you're part of the problem.
Mhm,
When the Rebbe told Dershowitz, I'm not
mhm,
upset that they invited this person. I don't think it was the Rebbe's idea, but I'm not upset that they're
mhm,
inviting this senator. The Rebbe felt that they were not being part of the problem. They were not being
mhm.
part of the spineless flattery of the Jewish people who are literally busy flattering their enemies, hoping they're going to be eaten last.
But why wouldn't it be seen as such?
It could be, and Dershowitz
That
felt
was
felt
Dershowitz's
that.
point, right,
That was
right.
Dershowitz's point.
Mhm,
What are you're feeding the crocodiles? You're feeding those who hate us.
mhm,
So what? So they'll
mhm,
maybe smile to you in 20 years when you're being led to the gas chambers. They'll give you a wave with a smile. That was
mhm,
Dershowitz's point, right?
mhm,
Fight these people tooth and nail. And
mhm,
it's an amazing point because I don't
mhm,
think, I don't think somebody in Hamas should be invited to a Chabad dinner and banquet to address the situation. But when I'm dealing with a proud American who's trying to be a
mhm,
patriot and who's actually sensitive to justice, but has been
mhm,
brainwashed for generations against Israel and
mhm,
knows about Israel less than I know about kangaroos in Australia,
mhm,
knows about the reality of Israel. But you're talking about fundamentally a good person who means well. Here, the Rebbe says, of course, you should invest resources in order to educate them and open them up to a side of the Jewish people in Israel that they don't know anything about. In fact, this was Abraham's mission. Remember,
mhm,
when Abraham came into the world, you had an entire world steeped in insanity of paganism and craziness and immorality. And what was Abraham's job? Educate, enlighten. And you know
mhm,
what's going to happen? Suddenly you'll see there are millions of people who are ready to listen. Don't give up on God's world.
right.
Don't give up on
So
God's world, but remember what your mission is.
right.
Don't sell the vision.
So this interview will probably be airing around Parsha Zachar, the Parsha where we remember Amalek. How much of our energy should be focused on remembering the negativity versus bringing the light? What would be the Rebbe's perspective on that?
What a wonderful question. Yeah.
No, I mean, I know the Rebbe wasn't into, like, making the Holocaust our this is the essence of what Judaism is, Holocaust education, of course, but why how much should we be educating versus remembering the evil?
Yeah. So it's interesting. This question is often asked, and it's almost like the two sides are pitted against each other. And I
Mhm,
personally would not see it that way. I think it has to be reframed. We have a daily mitzvah. There's a custom by many, many Jews at the end of the morning prayers to talk about six things that we ought to remember. They're called the Sheish Schirot, six remembrance. It's a very interesting Jewish custom. It's almost like every day, stop, take a deep breath, close your eyes or open your eyes, and remember six things. And one of the things we remember every single day is Zachor es asher asa lecha Amalek. Remember what Amalek did to you. Why do I have to remember that every single day? We have Shabbos Zachor, which is a whole Shabbos and a week,
mhm,
Purim, dedicated to remembering Amalek, and it's a big mitzvah, Shabbos Zachor. It's actually, according to many, a biblical mitzvah to hear the reading of the Torah on Zachor. But many Jews have literally a daily custom to remember Amalek. So it shows you the centrality of remembering Amalek in Jewish thought. It even says in the Torah, remember him from generation to generation and never forget. Lo tishkach. Why? And the answer is because remembering Amalek constantly is our only guarantee to stand up against Amalek in every form and fashion. And by the way, in Hasidic literature, there's a beautiful discussion how Amalek exists inside of us too. There are
mm,
forces of poison and hatred and negativity and doubt and klipa, shells and fakeness inside of us. And every single day I have to remember, yeah, this is a part of me. And it could rear its ugly head any moment. And if I don't remember what it is and how nauseating it is and how abominable it is, I can go down that rabbit hole. So it's so important individually and collectively to remember Amalek every day. But here is the vignette. And that is remembering Amalek is the introduction to live with your true essence, not to allow Amalek internally or externally to define your agenda, to allow your divine consciousness to define your agenda, to allow God and his Torah to define your agenda. So
Mhm.
that's where the two are completely not pitted against each other. It's not like, am I going to live my entire life remembering Hitler, Iran, Hezbollah, and Hamas, and we hope they all get wiped out very soon like Hitler?
Mhm.
Or I'm going to live as a proud Jew. Remembering Amalek from a Torah perspective is the interlude, it's the vista, it's the foyer, it's the introduction in order to be able to neutralize Amalek, whatever that Amalek represents, and then say, and therefore, this is not who I am.
Mhm.
I am a Jew who's going to build God's world, who's going to build the world of redemption. There's a
Mhm.
beautiful letter written in 1965 by the Rebbe to Elie Wiesel, Professor Eli Wiesel, who was, of course, an Auschwitz and Buchenwald survivor. And I had also the privilege of meeting him a few times personally. He was a close friend of my father. And I should mention that his wife, Marion Wiesel, just passed away
Passed
a few
away.
weeks ago, and she deserves a lot of credit for Elie Wiesel because he was somewhat of a hermit. He was a literature type of guy.
Mhm.
He loved being alone and just traveling, and he was like this. He wanted to be a bachelor, and it's really
Mhm.
her who convinced him to marry her, but also she
Mhm.
really helped him become the personality that he became. So she deserves a lot of credit for this. And the one who pushed him most to get married was the Lubavitch Rebbe. Elie Wiesel told the Rebbe, and I heard this from him, he doesn't want to get married because he does not want to bring children to a world that watched a
Mhm.
million and a half children being gassed and didn't say a word. The world remained
Mhm.
silent. So there's an amazing letter from the Rebbe to Elie Wiesel in 1965. From my own knowledge, it's the longest letter I have ever seen from the Rebbe. It's a 7-page letter. The Rebbe didn't write usually such long letters. There are longer letters, but this is, I think, a 6 or 7 page letter in Yiddish. It's the most eloquent and beautiful Yiddish. Real, beautiful Yiddish. I grew up in the home of a Yiddish journalist. I appreciate a good
Mhm.
Yiddish. So Ukrainian, Lithuanian, perfect literary Yiddish that the Rebbe writes to Wiesel. Wiesel was also a great Yiddish writer. Before he was also a French writer, but his Yiddish, was from his home in Sighet. He came from Vizhnitz Hasidim. And it's a very profound letter. One of the points the Rebbe makes to him is, you dedicated your life to remember Amalek, to
Mhm.
remember what Hitler has done to the Jewish people. And this is a fundamental mitzvah that we should never forget. But there's another mitzvah that I want to encourage you to do. And that mitzvah is to make sure that Jewish life is flourishing. We remember
Mhm.
Amalek. We also remember Sinai. We remember the Exodus of Egypt. We remember Shabbos. We
Mhm.
remember our destiny and our trajectory to build the world with divine holy values, with the 7 Noahide laws, with Torah, with mitzvahs, with morality, with love. You have dedicated your life to the first mitzvah.
Mhm.
Now I want you to put in equal energy, not more equal, but equal energy in dedicating your life to putting the last nail in Hitler's coffin, which is that the Wiesel dynasty will not be interrupted with you, but will
Mhm.
continue when you get married and you'll build a family. And then he writes to him, this is the Lubavitcher Rebbe's vintage classic humor. He says, I don't care if the child that you raise, the child that you and your wife, father and mother, and the child you raise will be a Vishnitzer Chassid, because Elie Wiesel came from Vishnitzer Chassid, or a Lubavitcher Chassid, or Stam Ayid Shomer Torah Mitzvah, or just a regular
Mhm.
Jew who celebrates the Torah and the mitzvahs. Either way, Either way, I'm encouraging you. Go ahead. Your kid does not have to be a Lubavitcher
Right.
Chabad Chassid. And then the Rebbe finishes. He says, this was too of a long letter, perhaps. But if it will result in me hearing that you got married, it was
Mhm.
worth my energy and time, and your time and energy in reading my letter. This was the Rebbe's humility.
Wow,
It took
beautiful.
it took 6 years, but in
Mhm.
1971, Elie Wiesel got married, and a year later, his wife gave birth to their son, Elisha, who he named after his father, who was killed in Auschwitz. And as Elie
Wow.
Wiesel told me, he said, I was also born in 72. And he said, I was at your bris, and your father, Gershon Jacobson, came to my son's bris. And the Rebbe sent a bouquet of flowers for the bris.
Oh, wow.
This was the
Wow.
Rebbe's own sense of the victory of the Jewish people.
Right.
And he named his boy Elisha after his own father. And the dynasty
Mhm.
continues now that his wife passed away, but their son, the family continues. So I think this is really the key. We
Mhm.
remember Amalek with every fiber of our being, because if we are responsible to hold up the frequency of love, we must be aware of the frequency of hate.
Mhm.
Always,
Mhm.
always. Not, and in our own life as well. In our own life
Right.
as well. The moment we become not conscious of both frequencies, we are vulnerable to fall prey to that frequency. That's the
Mhm.
basis of the Tanya. As worked out as you are, always remember what could come up at any given moment by your animal consciousness, coping mechanisms, and survival skills. And it could be ugly. Just remember that.
Mhm.
Remember that. Hopefully,
Mhm.
it won't come up, but it may come up. But because it's coming from a paradigm of love and oneness, that's why I'm remembering Amalek. It
Mhm.
never allows me to become exclusively defined by Amalek. We're not defined by Amalek. We're defined as the people who God has chosen to bring redemption to an aching world.
Wow, beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Rabbi Jacobson, for
Thank you.
joining us and for your
Thank
words of
you.
wisdom and for shedding light on this very important topic that so many people are really grappling with
Thank
today.
you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Chazak ve'amatz.
Wow, that was quite an incredible interview with Rabbi Jacobson. So many thoughts, so many ideas, so much wisdom there about anti-Semitism, about us as Jews, about hate versus love, about the symphony of truth. I loved how he explained that we are the ones who are supposed to be upholding that symphony of truth and how that is really our role. And how, in order to do that, we need to know what evil is. And that's why we remember. We do Zacharit in order to remember Amalek so that we can remember what evil is. But our main goal is to uphold that symphony of truth and love and goodness for the world. So many different areas, how he explained the Jewish perspective on anti Semitism and why we're here, our purpose and our mission to bring greater light and joy and goodness and morality to this world. I'd love to hear what you thought of this interview and which part resonated with you, if it explained something that you did not know about anti Semitism or the Jewish people. Send your comments in the below. We'd love to hear it. And if you are not subscribed, please make sure you are subscribed to Chabad.org/extraordinary. We are on all platforms that have podcasts, as well as on YouTube, as well as on Chabad.org. So find us there. And thank you so much for watching and for being part of this extraordinary community.